They pulled over a tired black woman in a rental car, laughed at her, and dismissed every word she said, until they found out she was a sitting U.S. Congresswoman. The rain had just started when Renitra Colburn pulled out of the rental car lot near Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport. Nothing heavy, just that fine, irritating drizzle that messes with your windshield, even when it's not really raining. It was a little after 6:20 a.m. She had flown red-eye from D.C., still wearing a soft navy sweater, black joggers, and Adidas sneakers. Her hair was pinned up in a clip. No makeup, no earrings, just her reading glasses and a canvas tote with briefing folders tossed on the passenger seat. It had been a long week. Late votes, committee infighting, and now she was here in Springfield, Illinois, to speak at a veterans' housing forum that she'd helped organize with local leaders. Her assistant had offered to send a car, but Renitra liked driving herself when she could. She said it helped her breathe. About 8 minutes into the drive, near a stretch of farmland off Toronto Road, she noticed the cruiser behind her. No sirens, no lights, just hanging close. She signaled into the right lane to let him pass. Instead, the lights flashed. Renitra exhaled, eased the car onto the shoulder, and put the gear in park. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't missed a sign. The car was clean, brand new, but here she was. She kept both hands on the wheel, watched in the mirror as 2 officers stepped out. One approached her side window, the other stayed behind, hand on his belt, watching. The first one, broad shoulders, buzz cut, maybe mid-40s, tapped on the glass. She rolled it down halfway. "License and registration," he said. "Sure," she replied calmly. "This is a rental. I have the agreement in the glove box. Would you like me to grab it?" He didn't answer her question. Instead, he looked her over. "You in a hurry to be somewhere?" "I have a speaking engagement in Springfield," she said. "A community forum at—" He cut her off. "Ma'am, I didn't ask for your schedule." Renitra turned to her tote bag slowly, took out her wallet and handed him her license. Then she reached for the rental agreement in the glove box, keeping her movements deliberate. "Got some attitude on her," the second officer said from behind the vehicle, not realizing his mic was still transmitting. The first one smirked. "Probably headed to one of those protest panels or something. They love to do those at the Marriott." Renitra heard every word. Her jaw stayed still, but her heart skipped. She looked directly at the first officer. "I'm Representative Renitra Colburn. I was invited by the Springfield Veterans Outreach Network." He blinked at her. "Representative of what?" "The United States Congress," she replied, steady. "Illinois 4th District." He laughed under his breath like she'd just claimed she played for the Cubs. "Right," he said, voice laced with sarcasm. "Congress. Got it." She could see the doubt in his eyes. He didn't look down at her license, just turned back toward his cruiser. She watched him walk off, the other officer close behind. Neither said a word. In the silence of the car, her fingers stayed wrapped around the steering wheel. This wasn't new. Not really. But it was rare now. Rare for someone to say the quiet part out loud. From the back, she heard one of them chuckle again. Something about fancy DC talk. Then the doors of the cruiser shut, and the quiet took over. Inside, Renitra took one slow breath and glanced at the clock. 6:37 a.m. She was supposed to be on stage at 7:30. If they ran her license now, this would be over in 10 minutes. But she knew better. What they didn't know would come back harder than they could have imagined. Back in the cruiser, Deputy Brent Orville leaned forward with Renitra's license still in his hand. His partner, Deputy Jason Kroll, sat beside him, flipping through the rental paperwork. "Renitra Colburn," Brent muttered. "Name sounds made up." Jason snorted. "What kind of first name is that, anyway?" "Sounds like one of those folks always trying to make a point." They both laughed. But it was an empty sound. Forced. Brent was already feeling a strange itch behind his ribs. Something about the way she had spoken. Calm, direct, not scared. Like she'd dealt with this before, and knew how it was going to go. He stared at her license photo again. It looked just like her. Glasses, same expression, unbothered, even defiant. "You want to run this?" he asked Jason. Jason shrugged. "Might as well." If she's lying, she's got guts. Outside, Renitra hadn't moved. She sat still, both hands now resting on her lap. Her phone buzzed inside her tote bag, but she didn't reach for it. She wasn't about to give them an excuse. 3 minutes passed. 4. Brent stepped out of the car and walked halfway toward hers before turning around. He didn't know what he was planning to say. He didn't even know why he was walking. Something about her silence got under his skin. "You said you're a what?" he called out. She looked out her window. "I'm a member of the U.S. House of Representatives." He smirked again. "You carry a badge for that?" "No, but my name's on legislation you probably haven't read." Jason chuckled behind him. "She's got jokes." Brent walked closer. His boots crunched on the wet gravel. "You look real comfortable for someone getting pulled over," he said. "Most people would be a little more nervous." "I have no reason to be nervous," she said. "Unless you give me one." Brent's jaw clenched. He didn't like that tone, not because it was disrespectful, but because it wasn't. "Tell me again," he said. "What are you doing out here?" "I told you," she said, calm as before. "I'm speaking at a housing forum for veterans." He glanced at her tote in the passenger seat. Folders inside. He couldn't read the labels, but he noticed the seal. U.S. House of Representatives. Embossed. Official. Jason radioed back from the cruiser. "Dispatcher's running her now." Brent walked back, more slowly this time. Renitra watched him. She didn't blink. Her breathing stayed even. But inside, her mind was running, because she wasn't thinking about herself anymore. She was thinking about every kid from Garfield Ridge who got pulled over for matching a description. Every single mother in Belleville who sat in a car with her child in the back seat while 2 officers circled her like she'd stolen her own life. She wasn't an exception. She was just the one with the camera pointed at her this time. Behind her, Jason's voice came through the radio again. "Hey, you're not gonna believe this." Brent picked up the receiver. "What?" Jason hesitated. Then, "She's legit. Says she's been in Congress since 21. Sponsored some federal bill about traffic stop reform." Brent's mouth twitched. He looked back at her car. Inside, she hadn't moved. Jason stepped out of the cruiser, holding the screen up. "There's even a photo of her on the website. Same glasses?" Brent didn't move for a second. Then he muttered under his breath. "Shit." Jason exhaled hard. "We're on camera, you know that." "Yeah," Brent said. "I know." He walked back to her car, more careful now. His voice changed. It softened. "Ma'am, we just got confirmation. Thank you for your patience." Renitra said nothing. "If there was any misunderstanding, we apologize. You're free to go." Still, she didn't speak. She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't yell. She didn't reach for her phone. She just looked at them. Both of them. With the kind of stillness that said everything. They turned away first. And still, neither one asked her name. Before she was Congresswoman Colburn, she was just Renitra, growing up on 91st Street in Roseland, back when the windows rattled every time the metro passed and the corner stores stayed open late but locked everything behind glass. She was the kid who asked too many questions. Why did the bus route end 3 blocks from her block? Why did her friend's mom cry after work even when she got promoted? Why did the cops always look angry when they drove by? Her mother, Venice, worked as a school secretary for over 2 decades. Sharp as a tack, never let anyone call her Miss V. Her father, Alonzo, worked at the main post office downtown. Woke up before the sun, made grits and eggs every morning, ironed his shirt every night. They didn't have much, but they believed in 2 things: dignity and education. You showed up clean, you spoke with respect, and you asked for nothing you weren't willing to work for. Renitra got her first taste of politics in high school, not the kind with podiums and handshakes, but the kind where the district cut her debate team's funding, while the other school, 5 miles north and whiter, got brand new uniforms and a shiny new library. She remembered asking the principal why. She remembered the silence that followed. That was when something clicked. She didn't want to be a lawyer at first. She wanted to be a journalist. She thought maybe if people just knew, they'd care. But her college mentor, Professor Hargrove, challenged her on that. Information is only power if it leads to action, he told her one afternoon over cold coffee. You want change? Learn how to write law. She graduated from Howard with honors, then earned her JD from Washington University in St. Louis. From there, she worked pro bono for years in Springfield, defending renters against landlords who treated people like termites. She walked into courtrooms where no one said her name right and still made her case with receipts and a voice that didn't waver. She didn't chase headlines. She chased solutions. By the time she turned 40, people in the community called her the closer. Not because she was loud, not because she had some gimmick, but because she knew how to take things all the way through. In 2020, when the pandemic hit and people started losing housing by the thousands, she helped organize the state's emergency eviction hotline. No title, no salary, just phones, volunteers, and fire in her bones. When a House seat opened up the following year, they told her to wait. They said she hadn't paid enough political dues. They said she should support another candidate, someone with a stronger image. She ran anyway, and won, not by a landslide, but by enough. Enough to walk into Congress with a backpack full of files and a district full of people who believed in her. Enough to push bills that no one else wanted to touch. Enough to make headlines the first time she challenged a senior rep on their housing vote. Calm, prepared, but unflinching. And just months before that traffic stop in Sangamon County, she introduced the Community Stop Transparency Act, a bill that would force departments to disclose more data on traffic stops, race, length, charges, and officer conduct. She wasn't naive. She knew what she was up against. But she didn't expect to live out the bill's purpose firsthand. Now, sitting in a rental car on the side of a rural Illinois road, all that history pressed against her ribs like weight she carried quietly. Because this wasn't about a bad cop. It was about the story people tell themselves when they look at someone like her. The stories they reach for before they ask any real questions. She'd written laws. They saw a problem. She spoke clearly. They heard attitude. She didn't need their approval, but she'd earned the right to be seen. She'd spent her whole life fighting this exact kind of silence. Inside the cruiser, Deputy Brent Orville was sweating now, though the AC was on and the temperature read a cool 68. He shifted in his seat, tapping Renitra's license against his thigh, no longer so quick to laugh. He'd worked traffic for 15 years, thought he could read people, thought he could sense who was trouble and who wasn't. But this didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something else, something heavier. Jason leaned over, reading through the dispatch log. You saw her district bio, right? She's got an official car back in D.C., security clearance, the works. Brent nodded slowly. She gave me a license and rental papers, clear as day. She said she was a congresswoman, Jason shrugged. Yeah, and we laughed in her face. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Then Brent got out of the cruiser again. Not as fast as before. Not cocky now. More careful. He walked toward her car like someone heading into a conversation they didn't want to have. Renitra was still in the same position. Hands visible. Face calm. She rolled the window down before he could knock. Is there a reason I'm still being detained? She asked, her tone even but colder now. Brent glanced at her license again. We've verified your credentials. You're free to go, Representative Colburn. There was a pause. Anything else? She asked. Brent shifted. No, just appreciate your patience. She gave no reaction, no nod, no smile, no venom either. Just a steady stare that told him she had catalogued every word. Brent started to turn back toward the cruiser, but stopped. We didn't know who you were, he added, trying to salvage something. She tilted her head just slightly. You still don't, she said. Then she rolled up the window. Brent stood there, awkwardly, as she reached into the glove box. Not for papers this time, but for a folded-up event flyer. She smoothed it on her lap. Across the top in bold type, Springfield Veterans Housing Forum. Guest speaker, Congresswoman Renitra Colburn. The truth had been within arm's reach the entire time. They hadn't asked. They hadn't looked. Back at the cruiser, Jason watched her drive off in silence. The taillights of the rental faded into the misty stretch of road, heading toward Springfield. I really thought she was bluffing, Jason muttered. Brent didn't answer. His throat felt dry. The weight in his gut was new, and it wasn't about the badge. It was about what they'd almost gotten away with, if not for a Google search. She didn't yell, Jason added. Didn't record. Didn't try to humiliate us. Brent sat down in the driver's seat, pulled the door closed, and stared at the dash cam recorder. But she didn't need to, he said. It's all right there, and he was right. Because just as he said it, the dashboard monitor blinked red. Recording saved. In that silent vehicle, it was impossible not to notice the irony. The bodycams had been on the entire time. The sarcastic remarks, the dismissive tone, the crude joke, the refusal to believe her. And now, whether they liked it or not, the footage belonged to public record. And that's when things started to break apart. Renitra didn't cry when she pulled into the Springfield Civic Center's parking lot. She didn't call her aide. She didn't post anything on social media. She just parked, turned off the ignition, and sat still. For 21 minutes, she'd been treated like a problem. A lie. A profile that didn't match the badge in their heads. Now she was expected to walk into a hall full of veterans, non-profit leaders, city officials, and talk about safe housing, as if nothing had happened. She reached for her compact from the tote bag, dabbed at her face with a tissue. Her reflection stared back, calm, even, unshaken. At least on the outside. Inside, she felt the weight of the pause. The space between knowing who you are and knowing that someone else refuses to see it. She checked her watch. 7:12 a.m. She stepped out of the car and walked toward the center's back entrance. Inside, people were already gathered, folding chairs in rows, coffee in tall urns, small packets of creamer laid out in bowls. The usual setup. A man with a clipboard noticed her and rushed over. "Congresswoman Colburn, we were worried you'd missed your flight." She smiled faintly. "Traffic delay." He guided her to the podium, thanked her again, handed her the microphone. The room quieted. She looked out at the crowd. Mostly veterans, many in their 50s and 60s, a few with hats or vests bearing the names of lost friends. And in that moment, she decided not to shelve it. She didn't give the version she had written, not word for word, not the one printed on the paper in her folder. She told them what happened, not to shock, not to grandstand, just the facts. "I landed at the airport around 6:20. I was pulled over just before 6:30. I gave my license, my rental agreement. I was asked why I was in town. I was mocked, dismissed, ignored. And I was not asked my name until after my identity had already been verified." Silence. No gasps, no murmurs, just stillness. The kind that holds respect. She looked out at them again. Every time you make a judgment before asking someone who they are, you risk missing the point. The badge I carry didn't protect me. The law I helped write didn't shield me. The only thing that changed their minds was a database. Someone in the back stood. An older black vet in a worn leather jacket. "They think they see everything when they see us," he said. "But they never see past the skin." There it was. She nodded. "I don't want your pity. I want your partnership. This isn't about me. It's about who gets presumed guilty before a word is spoken. And if it can happen to someone standing at this podium..." She let the sentence trail off. She didn't need to finish it. They understood. After the event, a quiet procession of handshakes followed. A few whispered thanks. One woman cried softly while clutching Renitra's forearm. It wasn't the speech she planned, but it was the one people needed. Outside, the sky had cleared. The drizzle had stopped. Traffic hummed along as usual. But back at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, things were anything but normal. Because sometime around 9 a.m., a local blogger posted a 47-second bodycam clip from a tip-off, footage of one officer laughing, the other smirking, and a seated woman saying calmly, "I'm a member of the U.S. House of Representatives." It caught fire. By noon, it had 40,000 shares. By 3 p.m., it was on cable news. By dinner time, Renitra's face was everywhere. News tickers ran her name. Talk shows debated it. Opinion pieces poured in from both coasts. The headline that led most of them? They didn't ask who I was. They assumed who I couldn't be. But what caught fire wasn't just the video, it was the silence before it. The first clip hit Twitter at 9:12 a.m. It was shaky, clearly screen-recorded from a desktop monitor. You could see the reflection of the person filming in the corner, glasses, coffee cup in hand. The clip was only 47 seconds long, but that was enough. "Got some attitude on her," the deputy says, unaware his mic is live. "Probably headed to one of those protest panels." The other one chuckles. Then the line that no one could ignore. "I'm a member of the U.S. House of Representatives." The silence that followed in the video was deafening, the kind that forces you to sit with your own discomfort. It didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It just existed. Clear, undeniable, raw. The reactions came fast. At first it was mostly retweets and angry quote posts. Unreal. This is what black women go through, even in office. No apology in the world makes this right. Then came the calls from journalists. Springfield outlets first, then St. Louis, then national reporters. Renitra ignored them all that morning. She wasn't ready to speak yet, not as a congresswoman, not as a survivor of misconduct, not even as a woman who'd just been humiliated and disregarded. But by the afternoon, the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office had no choice. They called a press conference at 2:30 p.m. in front of the beige brick courthouse. Sheriff Ray Dawn stepped up to the mic in a Navy windbreaker and tried to look composed. "We are reviewing the situation," he said, voice flat. "The deputies involved have been temporarily reassigned while we conduct a thorough investigation. We ask for patience and privacy for all parties involved. No apology, no acknowledgement of who she was, no mention of the fact that the entire country had now seen the clip." That's when it shifted. Because a few minutes later, standing in front of the Capitol reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., Renitra spoke. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. Her hair was tied back, sunglasses tucked into her jacket collar. She wore a neutral tan blazer and flat shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing performative. Just presence. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, "because I've learned over time that some people only hear what they're ready to hear. But silence, in this case, would be complicity." Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. "They didn't ask who I was. They assumed who I couldn't be." There it was. Again. The line. It struck people because it didn't sound rehearsed. It wasn't crafted by a team of consultants or buried in a thread of legalese. It sounded like someone who'd swallowed disrespect one too many times and decided not to digest it this time. Cable anchors replayed the quote within minutes. Activists made graphics. Teachers brought it up in classrooms the next day. People talked about it in grocery store lines, in Ubers, at dinner tables. Even people who didn't know her name the day before were now quoting her. "She didn't scream," a woman in Minnesota tweeted. "She didn't make a scene. She just let the truth sit there and speak for itself." The footage forced people to confront something they couldn't unsee. Not because it was the worst example of police misconduct, but because it was every day. Because it showed how power can look straight at credentials and still choose to be blind. The sheriff's office started receiving hundreds of calls within 24 hours. A group of Springfield residents showed up with printed-out screenshots of Renitra's bio and a banner that read, "Respect has no uniform." That Friday, the local high school's civics class submitted a letter to the city council demanding a review of law enforcement training procedures. Renitra didn't ask for any of that. She hadn't wanted to become a symbol. But people had seen her, truly seen her, for what she was. Not a nameplate on a desk, not a segment on a morning show, but a woman who handled insult with discipline and bigotry with composure. And it was that calm that cut through the noise. But what the world was waking up to now was that this wasn't about a moment. It was about a pattern. By Saturday morning, the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office had shut off comments on all of its social media pages. It didn't help. Emails kept pouring in, letters too, some handwritten. One from a Korean War veteran in Kansas simply said, You made me embarrassed to wear a uniform today. 2 deputies, Brent Orville and Jason Kroll, were placed on administrative leave, unpaid. The official statement said, pending review, but the public read between the lines. They always do. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse by noon, holding signs that didn't scream, but said just enough. Dignity is not a threat. Assumption is not protocol. Do better. Inside her modest Springfield hotel room, Renitra watched coverage without speaking. The volume was off. She didn't need to hear what they were saying. She could read the captions and the expressions on their faces. Some outlets tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. Others called it a moment of missed recognition. But the people on the street had no trouble naming it for what it was, a routine that had gone unchecked for too long. Her phone buzzed constantly. Friends, colleagues, fellow lawmakers. A few White House staffers had reached out, asking if she needed support. She appreciated the messages, but she hadn't answered most. She needed time to sit with what it meant that her story only mattered now that people knew her name. Late in the afternoon, her chief of staff, Tanya Greer, arrived from D.C. with a change of clothes and a stack of briefings. She walked in, hugged Renitra longer than necessary, then sat on the edge of the bed. "You okay?" she asked softly. Renitra stared at the muted screen. "No, but I'm clear," Tanya nodded. "They're asking if you'll do Face the Nation tomorrow, and maybe Morning Joe Monday." Renitra leaned back in the chair. "I'll talk, but not to spin this." Tanya smirked. "You've never spun a damn thing in your life." They sat in silence for a beat. "I didn't even flinch," Renitra said, almost to herself. "Not once." "And they still looked at me like I didn't belong," Tanya looked over. "Because they weren't looking at you. They were looking through you, hoping you'd vanish if they stared long enough." Renitra let the words sit in the room. By evening, her full statement had been released to the press. Simple, no theatrics, just clarity. "I did not demand a consequence. I expect accountability. I did not ask for recognition. I asked to be heard. What happened to me wasn't extraordinary. That's the problem." The sentence went viral in less than 2 hours. Major newspapers ran op-eds. Civil rights groups issued statements of support. A retired Illinois judge wrote an open letter titled, "When Congress Has to Carry Her ID Twice," that ran front page in the Sunday paper. But the most powerful echo came from the people. Not influencers, not blue checks, just parents, students, store clerks, retired nurses, veterans. Stories began surfacing. About stops that didn't end peacefully. About names that never made headlines. About voices that stayed in the dark because they didn't have a platform. Some posted their own clips. Grainy dashcams, static-filled cell phone footage. And all of them carried the same quiet scream underneath. "See me before you erase me." And still, through all the noise, the outrage, the noise, Renitra never made herself the center of it, not once. In a town hall livestream that Sunday night, she looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm not the exception. I'm just the one with receipts and a microphone." She paused. "And they knew neither of those things when they pulled me over." And that one sentence would echo louder than all their microphones combined. Monday morning began with a resignation. Deputy Jason Kroll submitted a 1-paragraph letter to Sheriff Dawn's office at 7:46 a.m. It wasn't emotional. It didn't mention the incident, just a bland statement about moving on to other opportunities. No apology, no admission. But Brent Orville didn't resign. Instead, he was reassigned, temporarily they said, to administrative duties. Word spread fast that he'd been pulled from all public-facing roles and moved to a desk in the evidence locker. People wanted more than that. By midweek, students from Lincoln High held a silent walkout. Hundreds of them gathered in the school gym with duct tape over their mouths and signs on their backs that read, "Credentials shouldn't be required for dignity." The press showed up. The school board issued a statement. The sheriff remained quiet. But the real reckoning didn't happen in City Hall. It happened in inboxes, in family group chats, in side conversations at diners and barber shops. People who had spent years keeping their own encounters to themselves started talking. A local news anchor named Reed Garvey shared a story on air about how his uncle, a retired army medic, once spent 3 hours in cuffs on the side of a road in 1996 because the officer didn't think the truck matched the driver. The comment section flooded. My father too. My sister. My son. And on it went. Meanwhile, journalists started digging. Old complaints surfaced. Not 1 or 2, but 6 official grievances filed against Orville in the last 9 years, all buried in internal paperwork, all marked resolved internally. 2 involved traffic stops, 1 alleged verbal harassment. The most damning, a 2018 complaint from a black postal worker who said Orville accused him of tampering with federal property because he was seen unlocking mailboxes too confidently. The worker was in uniform, on his route. That complaint, too, had been closed with no disciplinary action. Now, faced with the sudden spotlight, the sheriff's office said they were reviewing past disciplinary decisions. Reviewing, not reopening, not investigating. Renitra didn't hold a press conference about that. She didn't blast them online. She didn't need to. Others did it for her. A group of law professors from Southern Illinois University compiled the records and released a public timeline. A pattern ignored. It mapped Orville's past complaints against departmental procedures and highlighted where the chain of oversight broke down. It went viral. One line stood out. It took a congresswoman for someone to finally listen. What happens when it's just your neighbor? And that was the question hanging in the air now. What happens when no one rolls the footage? What happens when you don't have a platform or a podium? The truth was, this wasn't about one man with a badge. It was about how quickly systems close ranks when accountability knocks. It was about the shrug that too often follows misconduct, until cameras and public pressure make the shrug impossible. And yet, through the mess, something else began taking shape. Cities nearby began reviewing their own procedures. The mayor of Peoria announced a new policy requiring officers to state the reason for a stop immediately and record it, no exceptions. St. Louis County launched an anonymous reporting line. Even small towns were asking bigger questions. None of that made national headlines. But Renitra noticed. She saw every little ripple. And when asked by a local journalist what she thought about the changes, she said this: "I'm not here to ruin careers. I'm here to fix conditions." And that stuck with people, because it wasn't revenge she wanted. It was recognition. Not recognition of status, but of humanity, the kind that shouldn't require credentials to earn. This wasn't an isolated moment. It was a mirror. 1 week after the footage broke, Renitra stood before the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, not as a witness, not as a headline, but as a legislator, bringing her experience into the chamber where laws are born. Her notes were in a manila folder, though she barely glanced at them. The room was packed, cameras pointed. Members of Congress leaned forward, curious and tense. This wasn't a hearing scheduled months in advance. It had been added quickly, urgent, last minute, because the country was still talking, and Congress knew silence wouldn't cut it. When the chair yielded her 5 minutes, she didn't posture. She didn't rehearse. She told the story plainly. I didn't flash a badge. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell them who I was until they refused to ask. She described the stop, calmly, precisely, without editorializing. Just what happened, just what they said, just how long she sat there, knowing full well that nothing about her credentials would matter if they didn't feel like checking. I introduced a bill this year, the Community Stop Transparency Act. It was built on data, not anecdotes. But now I have both. She looked each member in the eye. No fury, no victimhood, just conviction. We cannot legislate dignity, but we can legislate process. We can't force belief, but we can require checks. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. She held the room like she held her steering wheel that day. Steady, with purpose. Later that afternoon, she walked out into the corridor where reporters waited, microphones extended like eager hands. She gave them 5 minutes. One reporter asked, "Congresswoman, are you worried that your experience will become politicized?" Renitra didn't hesitate. Everything gets politicized. But this is personal, another asked. Do you think your position is what saved you? She paused. No, what saved me was that they ran my name. What should have saved me was that I told the truth. My title came last. It shouldn't have had to. A third voice chimed in. Do you feel like this moment changes the conversation? She nodded. I think it reminds people that injustice doesn't ask what seat you hold. It just asks what you look like, and then decides everything else. The next morning, an unexpected voice joined hers. Retired Senator Leland Moss, a conservative Republican from Missouri, wrote a guest column in a Midwest paper. In it, he recalled how, decades ago, a young black state rep had been questioned at the state capitol building by security every single morning for a year. I was too afraid to speak up then, he wrote. I won't make that mistake again. His words surprised people. So did others. A sheriff in rural Nebraska wrote an op-ed supporting Retrace's proposed federal guidelines. A Republican mayor in Ohio asked for a copy of the bill. Even a few skeptics who had first dismissed the incident as an overreaction admitted publicly that the footage left them shaken. The momentum was growing, not as a tidal wave, but as a slow, unmistakable shift. This wasn't just about traffic stops anymore. It was about assumptions, about how quickly people form conclusions and how long those assumptions can live unchecked. It was about the difference between being heard and being believed. And Retrace kept showing up, not as the centerpiece of a media circus, but as a steward of a moment that had stretched far beyond her own life. In community meetings, people quoted her. At police trainings, departments showed her bodycam footage as a case study in failed communication. She hadn't planned to become a model for reform, but she wasn't running from it either. During a podcast appearance weeks later, the host asked her what gave her the strength to stay composed in the car that morning. Her answer was simple. I've been practicing that silence since I was 12. Because the question was never, who is she? It was, how many more? 2 months after the stop, Retrace returned to Springfield, this time by invitation from the mayor's office, to receive a community service award. The event was small, held at the local cultural center, with folding chairs and boxed lunches. Nothing fancy. That's how she liked it. She didn't bring a team, just her cousin Gerald, who had driven down from Rockford to surprise her, and her longtime aide Tanya, who never left her side in moments like these. When the MC introduced her, the crowd clapped. Not wildly, not with forced energy, but with something deeper. Respect. A recognition that she hadn't just endured something. She had done something with it. Retrace took the mic and smiled. Thank you, she said. It's good to be back, and under much better circumstances. There was a light laugh. A few people nodded. She continued, when people talk about what happened, they call it a moment. But what they don't realize is, this wasn't new for me. The only new part was that someone pressed record. She looked around. I've lived this story 100 times in 100 ways. At the mall, at the bank, in meetings where someone assumes I'm the assistant instead of the guest of honor. And each time the same silent question fills the room. Who do you think you are? She paused. But I never answer that question for them. I answer it for me. I know exactly who I am. That line stuck with people. After the speech, a teenage girl approached her with her mother. She introduced herself as Nyla, a junior at a local high school. My teacher made us watch your video, she said. We had to write a paper on it. Retrace smiled. What did you write? Neela shrugged. That I hope I can stay that calm when someone talks to me like that. I don't know if I could. Retrace looked at her for a moment. You don't always have to be calm. You just have to be clear. Calm helps them. Clarity protects you. The girl didn't say anything at first, but her eyes lit up. That's what they hadn't expected. They expected outrage, maybe chaos, maybe even a lawsuit. But what they got was a woman who took disrespect and didn't just defend herself. She turned it into a roadmap. She didn't build her response for cameras. She built it for the next person in line. The woman getting pulled over with a toddler in the back seat. The college kid walking into an internship interview where no one thinks she's the candidate. The black vet in his Sunday best being asked what store he works at. She built it for them. Renitra didn't walk away from the incident with bitterness. She walked away with more fuel. 2 weeks after the award ceremony, her bill advanced out of committee. The Community Stop Transparency Act was moving forward, slowly but surely. A provision was added requiring every department receiving federal funding to provide bodycam access within 7 days of a request. Another provision: a national database for repeat complaints against officers, no matter how minor. And maybe it wouldn't pass this session, maybe not the next, but it was real now. Written, filed, moving. It existed in the light. And for Renitra, that was the goal all along. Not to punish, but to prevent. Not to shame, but to shift the way power moved in small, unnoticed moments. She never once said she was above mistakes. But this wasn't about mistakes. It was about choices. Theirs and hers. And she chose, over and over, not to shrink, not for convenience, not for safety, not even for peace. She chose to take the narrative handed to her and return it, rewritten, redefined, and full of mirrors. So when people ask what the moral of her story is, she doesn't recite a quote or hand them a slogan. She just says, ask before you assume, listen before you speak, and see before you judge. Then she adds, because silence never saved anyone. But truth just might. If you believe stories like this shouldn't be ordinary, hit subscribe, because silence isn't an option anymore.